The fluorescent lights of the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department cast their familiar harsh glow across Detective Maria Santos's cluttered desk on the morning of March 12, 2024. 23 years had passed since the brutal murder of 18-year-old Jessica Martinez, a case that had haunted the small coastal community of Bluffton, South Carolina, and consumed the careers of 3 different investigators. The file folders containing witness statements, crime scene photographs, and forensic reports had grown thick with dust in the evidence room. Another cold case that seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. Jessica's murder on September 8, 2001, had shattered the quiet rhythm of low country life where Spanish moss draped ancient oak trees and the biggest excitement usually involved high school football games on Friday nights. The University of South Carolina freshman had been home for the weekend, visiting her parents Rosa and Miguel Martinez, who had immigrated from Guatemala 15 years earlier and built a successful landscaping business serving Hilton Head's affluent vacation community. Jessica represented everything they had sacrificed for. Dean's List student, pre-med major, the first in their family destined for medical school. What happened during the early morning hours of September 9th would transform Bluffton from a sleepy town of 1,275 residents into the center of a murder investigation that would span 2 decades. Jessica had spent Saturday evening with friends at a bonfire on Pritchard's Island, a secluded barrier island accessible only by boat during high tide. According to witnesses, she had left the gathering around 11:30 p.m., driving her silver Honda Accord back toward the mainland along the winding 2-lane roads that connected the island communities. The last confirmed sighting of Jessica alive came from Tommy Richardson, a local shrimper who was returning from a late-night fishing trip. Richardson told investigators he had seen Jessica's Honda stopped along Sawmill Creek Road around midnight, her hazard lights flashing in the darkness. He claimed he had considered stopping to offer assistance, but noticed another vehicle already pulled over behind her car, its headlights illuminating the scene. Richardson assumed someone was already helping and continued home, a decision that would torment him for decades. Jessica's body was discovered at dawn by a jogger, following the nature trail that meandered through the Savannah National Wildlife Refuge. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled, her body concealed beneath a pile of palmetto fronds approximately 2 miles from where her car had been abandoned. The Honda was found unlocked on a dirt access road used by hunters and fishermen, keys still in the ignition, purse untouched on the passenger seat containing her wallet with $47 in cash and her student ID from USC. Detective Robert Callahan, a 28-year veteran of the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department, had approached Jessica's case with the methodical determination that had earned him a reputation for solving difficult crimes throughout the Low Country. The physical evidence seemed promising initially. The killer had left behind DNA evidence that could potentially identify him once forensic technology advanced sufficiently. Tire impressions at the scene suggested the perpetrator drove a pickup truck with distinctive tread patterns, and witnesses from the bonfire provided detailed accounts of Jessica's final hours. The investigation revealed that Jessica had been a careful, responsible young woman who avoided risky situations and maintained close contact with her family. She had called her mother at 10:45 p.m. to confirm she was leaving the bonfire and expected to be home within 30 minutes. Rosa Martinez had waited up until 2 a.m. before calling the sheriff's department, her maternal instincts recognizing that something was terribly wrong. Jessica had never missed curfew, never failed to call if plans changed, never disappeared without explanation. Callahan's investigation initially focused on the bonfire attendees, particularly the young men who had been drinking and might have followed Jessica when she left alone. Each person present that evening was interviewed extensively, their alibis verified, their backgrounds scrutinized for any history of violence or sexual assault. The detective also examined Jessica's life at USC, looking for stalkers, rejected suitors, or anyone who might have harbored obsessive feelings toward the attractive pre-med student. The case generated intense media attention throughout South Carolina, with Jessica's photograph appearing on television news broadcasts and newspaper front pages across the region. The Martinez family offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the killer's arrest, money they had scraped together by mortgaging their home and liquidating their business savings. Hundreds of tips flooded the sheriff's department, each one requiring investigation, most leading nowhere. As months passed without an arrest, the investigation began to stagnate. The DNA evidence remained unmatched in the growing databases of criminal offenders. The tire impressions, while distinctive, proved too common to narrow down specific vehicles or suspects. Witnesses from the bonfire gradually moved away for college or jobs, scattering across the country and becoming harder to contact for follow-up interviews. Detective Callahan's retirement in 2008 marked the unofficial end of active investigation into Jessica's murder. His replacement, Detective William Hayes, reviewed the case files but found no new avenues to pursue. The evidence boxes were transferred to long-term storage, joining hundreds of other unsolved cases that represented the failures and limitations of rural law enforcement. Rosa Martinez continued calling the sheriff's department monthly for updates that never came, her hope gradually transforming into resigned grief. The Martinez family's life was forever altered by Jessica's murder. Rosa developed severe depression that required years of therapy and medication. Miguel threw himself into work with obsessive intensity, as if staying busy could somehow outrun the pain of losing his daughter. Their younger son, Carlos, only 14 when Jessica was killed, struggled through adolescence carrying the weight of being the surviving child in a family defined by loss. Bluffton itself changed in subtle but permanent ways. Parents began driving their teenagers to social gatherings rather than allowing them to drive alone at night. The bonfire gatherings on Pritchard's Island became less frequent and more heavily supervised. The sense of safety that had characterized this small low-country community was replaced by a wariness that lingered long after the initial shock of Jessica's murder had faded. The case might have remained cold forever, if not for a phone call that Detective Santos received on that March morning in 2024. The caller was Dr. Patricia Williams, a forensic psychologist who had been working with trauma victims at the Charleston Veterans Administration Medical Center. Dr. Williams explained that one of her patients, a former Marine named David Kowalski, had been experiencing flashbacks and nightmares related to events he had witnessed in South Carolina more than 20 years earlier. Kowalski, now 43 years old, and struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder from his military service in Iraq and Afghanistan, had recently entered intensive therapy to address his psychological trauma. During sessions designed to help him process combat experiences, unexpected memories from his civilian life had begun surfacing with disturbing clarity. The most persistent of these memories involved a night in September 2001, when he had witnessed something that he now realized might be connected to an unsolved murder. Dr. Williams explained that Kowalski had been reluctant to contact law enforcement directly, fearing that his mental health issues might make him appear unreliable as a witness. However, his memories had become so vivid and consistent during therapy sessions that both he and his doctor believed they represented genuine recollections rather than trauma-induced hallucinations. The details he provided matched publicly available information about Jessica Martinez's case with an accuracy that suggested he had indeed been present during crucial moments. Detective Santos felt the familiar surge of excitement that accompanied potential breakthroughs in cold cases, but she tempered her optimism with the professional skepticism that years of investigative work had taught her. Witness testimony from more than 2 decades earlier, complicated by mental health issues and the passage of time, represented both opportunity and challenge. The human memory was notoriously unreliable, particularly when filtered through trauma and the distortions that accumulated over years of psychological stress. The meeting between Detective Santos and David Kowalski took place on March 15th in a small conference room at the Veterans Administration Medical Center, its beige walls decorated with motivational posters that seemed inadequate against the weight of what they were about to discuss. Kowalski appeared older than his 43 years, his graying hair cropped short in military fashion, his weathered hands betraying the nervous energy of someone carrying secrets that had festered for decades. Dr. Williams sat beside him, providing the emotional support that would allow him to navigate memories he had buried beneath layers of combat trauma and survivor's guilt. Santos had prepared extensively for this interview, reviewing every detail of Jessica Martinez's case file and consulting with forensic psychologists about the reliability of recovered memories in trauma patients. She understood that Kowalski's testimony could either breathe new life into a cold case or lead the investigation down another frustrating dead end. The detective's experience had taught her to approach such situations with cautious optimism, gathering information methodically while avoiding leading questions that might contaminate genuine recollections. Kowalski's voice was barely above a whisper as he began recounting the events of September 8, 2001. He had been 20 years old then, recently discharged from the Marines after completing his initial enlistment and working temporary construction jobs throughout the Low Country while deciding whether to re-enlist or pursue civilian career opportunities. On that particular Saturday night, he had been driving home from a poker game in Beaufort, taking the back roads through the wildlife refuge because he enjoyed the solitude and the way moonlight filtered through the Spanish moss. The construction work had required him to become familiar with the network of dirt roads and hunting trails that crisscrossed the coastal region, paths that most locals avoided after dark due to their isolation and poor lighting. Kowalski explained that his military training had made him comfortable with nighttime navigation, and he often used these routes to decompress after stressful days dealing with civilian employment that felt mundane compared to his Marine Corps experience. Around 12:15 a.m. on September 9th, Kowalski had been driving along Sawmill Creek Road when he encountered what appeared to be a disabled vehicle with its hazard lights flashing. As he slowed down to assess whether assistance was needed, he noticed a pickup truck parked behind the disabled car, its headlights creating harsh shadows that made it difficult to distinguish details. Initially, he assumed he was witnessing a routine roadside assistance scenario, perhaps a good Samaritan helping a stranded motorist. But something about the scene had triggered his military-trained instincts for recognizing danger. The body language of the figures he could see illuminated in the headlight beams suggested conflict rather than cooperation. The person standing beside the disabled vehicle appeared to be backing away from someone approaching from the pickup truck, movements that conveyed fear rather than gratitude for assistance. Kowalski had pulled his own vehicle to the shoulder and turned off his headlights, using darkness as concealment while he tried to determine whether intervention was necessary. What he witnessed next would haunt him through 2 decades of nightmares and flashbacks. The figure from the pickup truck had grabbed the person beside the disabled car, and a brief struggle had ensued before both individuals disappeared from view behind the vehicles. Kowalski heard what sounded like a car door slamming, followed by the sound of the pickup truck's engine revving as it pulled away from the scene, leaving the disabled vehicle behind with its hazard lights still flashing. The young veteran had faced a crucial decision in that moment: investigate the scene to determine what had happened, or avoid potential involvement in what might have been a domestic dispute or criminal activity. His military training urged him toward action, but his recent transition to civilian life had left him uncertain about his legal authority and responsibilities. After several minutes of internal debate, Kowalski had driven closer to the abandoned vehicle and discovered it was empty. Keys still in the ignition, no sign of its occupant. The discovery had troubled him deeply, But Kowalski's decision-making had been complicated by factors he was only now able to articulate clearly through therapy. His discharge from the Marines had followed a series of disciplinary incidents related to alcohol abuse and conflicts with superior officers, problems that had left him feeling disconnected from both military and civilian communities. He had been drinking at the poker game that evening, though he insisted he was not intoxicated, and he feared that reporting the incident might lead to legal complications he was not prepared to handle. More significantly, Kowalski revealed that he had recognized the pickup truck involved in the incident. The vehicle belonged to someone he knew from construction work, a detail that had made his decision to remain silent even more complex. The truck was a late-model Chevrolet with distinctive chrome running boards and a rebel flag decal on the rear window, modifications that made it easily identifiable to anyone familiar with the local construction community. Detective Santos felt her pulse quicken as Kowalski provided this crucial detail, but she maintained her professional composure while encouraging him to continue his account. The identification of a specific vehicle represented the kind of concrete lead that could transform a cold case investigation, particularly when combined with the DNA evidence that had been preserved from Jessica's crime scene. However, Santos also recognized that 23 years had passed since these events, and the reliability of Kowalski's identification would need to be carefully verified. The pickup truck, according to Kowalski's recollection, had belonged to a man named Ray Fletcher, a heavy equipment operator who had worked on several construction projects throughout Beaufort County during 2001. Fletcher had been known among construction crews for his volatile temper and inappropriate comments about women, behavior that had made him unpopular with most of his co-workers but had never resulted in formal complaints or legal action. Kowalski explained that Fletcher had been approximately 35 years old in 2001, a divorced father of two who lived in a mobile home park outside Bluffton and spent most evenings drinking at local bars known for catering to construction workers and commercial fishermen. The two men had worked together on a road improvement project near Hilton Head during the summer of 2001, an experience that had given Kowalski first-hand exposure to Fletcher's aggressive personality and disrespectful attitude toward women. The witness described several incidents during their brief working relationship that had revealed Fletcher's capacity for violence. On one occasion, Fletcher had physically threatened a female inspector from the Department of Transportation who had questioned the quality of their work. Another time, he had made explicit sexual comments about teenage girls walking past their job site, remarks that had made even his rough-edged co-workers uncomfortable. Detective Santos realized that David Kowalski's testimony represented both the breakthrough her investigation desperately needed and the challenge that would define the next phase of her work. His identification of Ray Fletcher provided a specific suspect with means, opportunity, and a behavioral profile consistent with Jessica Martinez's killer. However, locating Fletcher after 23 years, verifying Kowalski's memories, and building a prosecutable case would require investigative skills that would test every aspect of her professional experience. The interview concluded with Kowalski providing additional details about Fletcher's appearance, habits, and associates that might help track him down in 2024. Santos assured him that his cooperation would be kept confidential during the initial investigation, protecting him from potential retaliation while she worked to corroborate his testimony through other sources. As she drove back to Beaufort County, the detective felt the familiar combination of excitement and apprehension that accompanied major developments in cold cases. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in 23 years, Jessica Martinez's case had a viable suspect and a witness whose testimony might finally bring justice to a family that had waited too long for answers. David Kowalski's courage to finally speak the truth he had carried for 23 years represents more than just a breakthrough in Jessica Martinez's case. It demonstrates how trauma can both bury and eventually reveal the most crucial evidence. Detective Santos now faces the monumental task of tracking down Ray Fletcher, verifying Kowalski's memories through forensic evidence, and building a case strong enough to withstand the scrutiny that decades-old testimony inevitably faces in court. For Rosa and Miguel Martinez, this development offers something they had almost stopped believing possible: genuine hope that their daughter's killer might finally face justice. The DNA evidence preserved from 2001, combined with Kowalski's detailed recollections, could provide the combination of scientific proof and eyewitness testimony that prosecutors need to secure a conviction. Yet, even as this case moves toward potential resolution, it serves as a stark reminder of how many other families remain trapped in their own cycles of unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Cold cases like Jessica's don't just represent investigative failures. They reflect the complicated ways that trauma, fear, and time can conspire to bury truth beneath layers of silence that sometimes take decades to penetrate. In Bluffton, South Carolina, the Spanish moss still drapes those ancient oak trees, but perhaps now the shadows they cast will finally begin to lift.